Like and follow if you love horror. Murdoch watched her leave with a subtle smile. She was joined by a scraggly man in a suit that seemed to fit him about as well as a fish took to fire. Amygdala? The newcomer asked. A potent alchemical reagent, Joe Jack. Murdoch explained. Oh, you mean the soup our Slashow's leaving behind. Joe Jack's southern accent gave his words a distinct rhythm. Well, I expect she's right about that. I mean, if it's our boy. Joe Jack smiled, revealing teeth that, while clean, were crooked enough to make an orthodontist cry. Murdoch sighed, glancing at the man out of the corner of her eye. She didn't have a lot of patience for ignorance and the lack of enunciation in which Joe Jack lived his life, but he was very good at what he did, and Murdoch had been shuffled around for backhanding subordinates in the past enough that she had finally learned her lesson. Perpetrator, Joe Jack. We don't call them Slashos. Miranda turned to survey the scene. She pulled out her tablet and checked the GPS of her team. Ronnie was already following the footpath pointed out by the young agent Safferstein. Jiro was at base, probably drinking syrup from a bottle. A low growl rumbled through Miranda's throat. What a ragtag group of losers. It was no wonder she'd been given this lot. Joe Jack, grab Ronnie and get inside to see what we can find without the all-prying eyes. Yes, sir? Ma'am? Joe Jack nodded. Once inside, Miranda dismissed forensics and the unis. The three agents stood at each end of the room and pulled up their phones. Joe Jack struggled with his for a moment, but then seemed to get it working with an awkward smile. After a few seconds, strange blue lines crisscrossed the room, forming a laser grid of symbols and mathematical formulae. After a few moments, the three phones beeped, and the lines slowly faded away. Inquisitor's initial work was done until they had a luxury of more privacy. The agents put away their phones in expectation that their new colleague would be in soon. They didn't want to spring things on her like Aegis apps before she was ready. How do you want to play this? Ronnie raked his fingers through his dark, high and tight. Everyone deals with it differently, Miranda grumbled, but she's a logical woman, consumed by details. We present the facts and she'll assimilate just fine. With respect, Ronnie said, she's a neutral, a normal. All of us had the spark before our indoctrination into the agency and eventually the UPD. Can it? A growl emitted from Miranda. The FBI hasn't seen a criminal profiler like her in 15 damn years, and they benched her. We need an agent like her. She called this case without any spark, any sense of the occult, or an Inquisitor app. She did it by herself, purely with good investigation work and her sense of criminal psychology. Yeah, but slashers ain't normal people. They don't do people things. In fact, sometimes they ain't really even people, Joe Jack added. Slashos? Diana's voice came from the doorway. Miranda pinched her temples. Her face tightened up. Agent Ghoulage means our perp. It's his pet name for the sort of serial killers we investigate. One I have explicitly told him not to use several times. Her eyes landed on Joe Jack, who looked back nervously. Yes, sir. Ma'am, he said with a nod. He then wandered over to Diana in his lazy fashion. Most call me Joe Jack. Joe Jack? Diana firmly shook the man's hand, but looked over at Miranda with obvious concern. Focusing on her duty, Agent Safferstein got back to business. I was delivered an important piece of information. Speak freely. Miranda folded her hands behind her back. While an autopsy is necessary to be sure, only 3 of our Vics had a portion of their brain removed. Our killer's trophy, the amygdala, Diana explained. The first homicide had 4 Vics, all of their amygdalas removed. This time only 3. The floater on the lake, the Vic on the beach, and the Vic on the hook. She pointed back at the chalk line over the coat rack. Apparently our killer removed the Vic from the hook, dug around in his brain, then hung him back up again. Our boy has a taste for the theatrical, Ronnie said. Not quite, Diana went on. This scene wasn't staged. No, our killer looked at his victim with extreme distaste and disrespect. He pinned him to the coat rack to kill him, but he hung him back up because he enjoyed looking at our Vics with disgust. Like he deserved no less than to be treated like a common object. Our killer may need his trophies to satisfy his ritual, but he chooses his victims because he believes they deserve to be killed. Excuse me, he? Ronnie was still quite skeptical. Yes, you'll likely be looking for a large male, probably white, in his late 30s to early 40s. He's extremely strong, either a bodybuilder or abnormally large. We can tell this by the excessive level of malice in each killing and the victim's inability to defend themselves with any level of success. I digress. It seems the killer is missing a trophy and will likely come back for it, or seek it elsewhere. Seeming satisfied with her profile, Diana waited to receive questions. I'm sorry, what about any of this tells you it's a white male? Ronnie was more than just a little skeptical. He was calling the new agent out. You want me to explain 3 years of in-depth criminal psychology to you now? Her response came off as sarcastic, as usual. But in reality, Diana thought that was indeed what Ronnie was requesting. All right, enough. Miranda held up her hands. Ronnie, Joe Jack, follow the footpath to the lake. If our fellow as big as Agent Saferstein suggests, he left prints somewhere. And give the lake our special kind of attention. Ronnie and Joe Jack headed out. As they left, Ronnie muttered to himself. And they call magic hoodoo nonsense. That woman hasn't been here 10 minutes and she thinks she's seen more than the Inquisitor app can show us. Well now, I'm kind of starting to see your point, Joe Jack muttered. What the hell do you know? Ronnie said dismissively. Well, sir, if I was going to need an amygdala for the potion receipt, if I was going to need an amygdala for the potion recipe, supposing I had to kill a lot of people to get it, Joe Jack began. Amygdala, you dumb hick, Ronnie interrupted, only half listening. Joe Jack's eyes flashed. He may be uneducated, but before Meemaw had gotten sick, he had won a James Beard for his work in Dallas kitchens. He didn't mind being called a hick, and he sure didn't have the same education as his colleagues, but that didn't make them any better than him. At least he was a good person, and that mattered a hell of a lot more than most things, in Joe Jack's opinion. Well, if I needed it, and supposing I had to kill to get it, I'd pick people I didn't like, he'd explained. Ronnie stopped. So why does that mean he's a white male? Well, I'm a white male, Joe Jack answered. Ronnie just shook his head and continued down the footpath. He was focused on loose dirt, possible mud, anything which a foot would leave an impression. He could tell by the size of the grass patches that were stomped flat that the perp was indeed quite large. Eventually he found a partial bare footprint squished into deer dung. Here we go, Ronnie said. It looks like an arch and partial heel. From the width and the length of the arch, I'd say about 7 foot 8 inches, maybe pushing 8 foot. The shape of the arch and the heel means humanoid. A giant humanoid that runs on chemicals. He paused. I think we got ourselves a Frankenstein. Back at the cabin, Miranda and Diana made their way to the SUV parked outside. I wanted to show you this. Diana directed Miranda's to inspect the skid marks that left behind the tires. They came to a sudden and complete stop. They didn't park at a normal angle, and the back door is slightly ajar. The driver and the passenger were running from our perp to get into the cabin for defense, but there's no other tire prints, no indication that our perp used any sort of vehicle. If the Vicks had a car, why did they turn around and come back to the cabin? This model is capable of full off-road drive. The tires are all new and fully inflated, no detectable engine trouble, and a full tank of gas. How did a man who was likely on foot chase the victims back to their cabin when they had a car? I have to hand it to you. Your reputation alone was impressive enough, but your ability to see the puzzle in both macro and micro is frankly beyond comparison, Miranda confessed. The questions you're asking are exactly why we're here. That's the specialty of our unit. We answer questions that conventional investigation and forensics cannot answer. Experimental forensics? Diana didn't follow her new captain's meaning. How can we build a case without legally proven acceptable methods? We're not here to build a case. We're here to hunt a monster, Miranda explained. I'm sorry.